Hey, I'm Nicole.
And I'm Sarah.
We are back for another money chat. And today, Sarah is going to be asking me some questions about my marriage. Ah!
So I saw a girl talking on Instagram about what her and her husband do to talk about money all the time. And I think it's a big topic of conversation that people either sometimes they do it really well, sometimes they really haven't thought about how important it is. And so you share a lot about how you and Chris communicate. And so I thought maybe we could like formally talk about it a little bit more. So how do you and Chris typically talk about money?
Well, it has evolved over the years. I started the marriage. We started marriage as a team sport. When we got married, we really didn't talk much about money, actually. I had no confidence. I was super young. My husband's 12 years older than me. And when we met, he kind of just like swooped in and took care of me. Like he would like take my checks to the bank because I'd let them stack on my counter because I never liked going to the bank. He'd open my mail, like just like doing things like that. And I made too many assumptions when we got married as well about my husband's financial situation. So, number one, don't do that. Like, actually have conversations before getting married and ask real questions. But because of that and making those assumptions, we really didn't have real conversations until forced to by means of me finding things out like by piecemeal. And so it was a slap in the face lesson of like, fuck, like this is really important and I should actually practice what I preach. And it is so much harder when it's yourself because emotions are involved. And what I learned is that my husband hates hearing the word no. He hates being told what to do. And anytime that I say no to his idea or what he wants to buy, or if I tell him what to do with money, I get immediate resistance, even if he might agree. And so when money things come up, I always approach it as like an open ended question. So, for example, a long time ago, he wanted to buy a castle.
I
Um,
remember that.
yeah, I can't make this shit up. So he wanted to buy a castle. And like my immediate response was like, no, why? No, that's dumb. You can't afford a castle at the time. And because I said no, he like went all in, like trying to make this happen. And so I backed it up and I said, okay, cool. Like, how are we going to make this happen? How do you want to pay for it? And so I let him like kind of solve that. And then I said, okay, cool. So if we do it that way, then how are we going to do these other things that we enjoy doing and want to do? And so I essentially asked a lot of open ended questions and then he self solved. And so if you have a husband who likes to have the idea be his idea, or he doesn't like to hear the word no, or maybe he's delusional, asking open ended questions and having a collaborative conversation versus an immediate no response is really helpful. So that's the first thing. I think like lesson number one for me was like it's not just my world and I have to have to collaborate a little bit.
I think that's hard
um
for us because we're used to having the answers when it comes to money,
yes,
and that
yeah.
struggle with that too. Like you just know the logical dollars and cents answer, and it's not always that straightforward because of what we do.
Yeah, and I think
And somebody else is probably in that situation where maybe they're a very logical
Mhm.
person, and so like it seems so clear.
Yeah, like your math says the answer is no, but sometimes even though you know the math is no, you have to let your partner come to that
Yeah.
conclusion on their own by a different way of getting there. It's like you can come to the same result a lot of the time, but your methods of achieving that result are different. And we need to remember that as partners. And another thing too that we ended up doing into our marriage was setting a number that we promised each other that we would have a conversation about before buying something. Our number was 500 bucks. Like if you're going to buy something over 500 bucks, just like tell me, let's have a conversation about it. So there's no surprises. Again, experience, I learned that he would just like go buy a new truck and it was to flip, of course, but oh my God, that's a lot of money. And it pissed me off. We learned that in his mind, he was doing it as an investment. Why would we need to talk about that? In my mind, I'm thinking you're insane. What are we doing? And so ultimately, like the more communication, the better, being transparent, talking about it. But then in your relationship, you may want to set a spend limit. Like, hey, if you're going to spend more than $1,000 or $500, whatever, like let's talk about it first, just so we're aware. And then that avoids the future potential argument.
Yeah. When you say you made assumptions, did you assume he was better at money, had more money saved, had more things under control, or
Yes. I
okay.
assumed all of those things. I thought he had more money. I thought he owned the family business that he works at. He doesn't. And I thought, yeah, he was more of a planner, and it turns out he's not any of those things. So, my husband, bless his heart, like he does not really care about money actually. And what I mean by that is if he like sees money in the bank, he like is like, oh, let's spend it, and I don't really care about tomorrow, right? Like, let's just have a good time. I could die tomorrow, I'm going to spend it all. Where me, I like to have a very structured, thoughtful plan to know that
Tracking.
of course, all the things are taken care of. And so what I ended up doing was just setting up a bunch of different accounts. So that way for him in our main checking, it's like permission to spend, have at it, because that's there. So he doesn't, we don't have to fight our money types that way. And then I'm planning everything else in the background. He knows all the other money is there in the background, but he doesn't really know specifically how much or like what it's for, because he knows it's taken care of. We've talked about it, and that way he also can't touch it. So like we've kind of set up these like those boundaries and parameters, but then I know him so well and his money type that it makes me feel safe and comfortable that whatever he spends in that like spend account, I don't have to fight about it. I don't have to question it. It's not screwing our future over. I'm not going to agree with what he spends it on, but I know it's not going to hurt our financial future. And I think that's another important thing, right? Is like you don't have to agree with what your partner spends money on as long as it fits within your mutual plan. You're always going to value things differently.
That reminds me of a client we had a long time ago, and she really didn't want him to drink like energy drinks.
Yeah.
And he just was like, I just like them and I want one every day. So instead of them talking about it, he was buying it and paying like, I don't know, $5 a day on those energy drinks, which like adds up to quite a bit. Whereas it was like, if you just let him have his one energy drink a day, you guys could buy a case when you go grocery shopping and it would save you like X amount of dollars. And no, that's not like make or breaking their retirement, but it's like one of many little things that they were doing where it's just like sometimes you gotta like pick your battles on that, I guess, and maybe work on the health consciousness of that later. But in the meantime, he was like hiding that habit a little bit, and it was, costing them.
Totally. Insane for me, actually. Like, so one of the things, I love getting my nails done, right? Like if I had to, I would eat ramen instead of like, if we're going, it just makes me feel good about myself. Where Chris is always like, oh, that's a waste of money. But, so I would just go and not tell him. And now he knows I'm getting it done every single like 10 days without fail. And so he gives me cash because he's the cash guy, and it saves money because those nail places love their cash and they always charge less. So, little, again, perfect example, little things like that. We are not agreeing on that spend, but we both know it's what makes each other happy, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So, you don't need to be on the same page doesn't mean you need to agree specifically on all the same things.
What is one thing that you're doing now to make those conversations easier?
I'm just not avoiding them. Like I used to have that mindset, years ago, like, oh, I'm too tired to even care about this right now or bring it up, because when you get home, you're tapped out. And the last thing you want to do is like talk about money. Right. But now I just don't like sugarcoat it. I don't dance around it. I will literally just say like, hey, we have to talk about this. Do you want to talk about it tonight or tomorrow morning? And I'll give him that option too, because I want to respect him being exhausted as well. But I'm upfront. I don't avoid the conversation. I just like rip off the Band-Aid every time, because I've learned that the more I avoid it or we procrastinate on those conversations, I then become the passive aggressive one. And it's like my own fault for not bringing it up.
So I think it's easier if you're in a newer relationship that you could start having those conversations. What advice, you've been married like over 10
almost 15
years.
years.
Yeah. So you've been married like,
Mhm.
if you were to meet somebody today who has never had that conversation and they've been married or in a relationship as long as you are longer, what advice would you give to them to like start the conversation today for the very first time?
Well, I think it would be the, hey, we've never talked about money or even how we're going to accomplish all the things we dream about together. What would be a comfortable starting point for you to really dive into financials? And I think a lot of the time it is, you're going to start that conversation with your spouse, see how they respond. We have a list of questions too that we can give you guys, like put it in the comments, reach out to us, but we'll give you those questions to kind of start the initial conversation. But I do say this all the time, and this is by no means an advertisement for us, but like there's tremendous value in hiring a third party, working with a financial advisor that's that neutral source, because we don't have to go home with you, right? So it's so much easier for us to help you guys through the conversation, but then help find middle ground. And oftentimes, like when you hear it from somebody else, it lands differently than when you hear it from your spouse. And I joke all the time, like I used to use our CPA as the tiebreaker between Chris and I, because like he would listen to what the CPA said, even if it was literally the exact same thing I said. And so if we can steamroll over our spouses all day long, but like when it's coming from an advisor, and then they might, we have different perspectives all the time. We can ask those questions, but then we're able to show you your potential, and that changes the conversation too. It's never about telling you what to do. It's just helping you walk through these conversations together and then showing you options. So as a team, as a couple, you can choose what's most important, significant, and then get aligned with your potentially very different money types.
If you could go back to the beginning with you and Chris, what's one thing that you would have done sooner in your relationship?
I would have just had more awareness around his actual financials, and even like the financials around his business, the loans that he had, how he was doing things. Because when we met, I had just started the business and I was in the throes of building the company, and I was working most of the time, like 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so as I was doing that, I was so relieved to have him just take over the household bills and take care of all that stuff, where I just didn't ask questions because I was tapped out. I was in for a rude awakening when life events happened and I had to take over that stuff for a little bit. I felt so embarrassed, so ashamed that I really didn't know a lot of our personal financials. And, when I had to take that over, I was like, oh shit, like this isn't what I thought.
I think
So,
sometimes we're all naive to the perception too. I going back to Instagram too, I see these posts lately. In fact, I saw one yesterday that was like, "Hey, what do you do? Like, you take 3 vacations a year and you're carrying this designer bag. Like, are you in debt?" And it's like, sometimes we are making a lot of assumptions just about other people's lifestyles. It is easy to make assumptions like, "Oh, they're super successful because they do and have these things, or they have a business," but you don't see the behind the scenes things. And the same thing, like, you can make assumptions that somebody who drives old bucket of junk car is broke, but maybe like that's just not a priority to them. And now today, 15 years later, like I think I'm hyper aware of the fact that like what you see is not always what the reality is
that's
behind the
right.
scenes.
Mhm.
So, we don't make those assumptions as much,
Mhm.
but we were different people. You guys were different people 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Totally. And you know what? I think the one thing Chris and I were always aligned on were that like upfront hustle contract, right? Where, when we met, I said I was starting a business. This is my schedule. Do you have a problem with that? He was doing the same thing. And he was always in that mindset too of like, we did want to set ourselves up for more passive income later too. So, I would work a 12, 15-hour day. And on the weekends, we would flip a house. Like I
right.
would work nights, weekends. Like, we wanted to, of course, kill each other a couple of times. But like, most of the time it was only because I got hangry.
Mhm.
But we did all of those things because we did have that mutual goal later of being set up so that we had optionality. I think a lot of people make assumptions or look at us and say like, "Oh, the worst comment ever to me is like that must be nice." And it's like, "Oh yeah, well, come do what I did," right?
Yeah.
And there's two sides of that. It's the, hey, must be nice to be you, but they don't see what we did. And then the other thing is couples will say what they want, but then you have to take ownership in the work it takes to get there too.
Right.
And then when you learn the work it takes to get there, it's okay to tap out of what you thought you wanted.
Yeah.
You can keep what you wanted and do the work, but you might not actually want it as bad as you thought because of the work. And that's okay too. And I think sometimes we hold on to these ideals that aren't technically aligned with what we want because of the assumptions we're making.
Right.
And then you're perpetually making yourself miserable because you feel like you're not measuring up to this like mythical version of someone else's definition of success as well. I think for couples, it's really important for you guys to define your own definition of success, right? Like actually talk about what success is to each one of you, and then follow that. Align your money with that. Align your money with your goals, and like block out everybody else's opinions, what they're doing, what you're seeing on social media. And then you guys create this like force shield around yourselves and protect that fiercely. And that I think can be so helpful as a couple and as a team. It's like, you guys are the team, and everybody else doesn't really matter. And I think we forget that.
It's funny, that's, like, so timely because I just read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck again, like, the other day. I finished it, and that's, kind of what they talk about, like, the whole book is not about not giving a fuck, the whole book is, like, about actually giving a fuck, but about the things that matter to you, and, like, sometimes that changes, like, you might have cared about this other thing before, and then you get into it, and you're like, "Ooh, I actually don't like that, or don't wanna do that," and it is okay. Call it out and call yourself out on it, and then just redefine what it is that you care about, and maybe you don't like the hustle culture, and so you're not gonna have the same things, but you have to admit that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And both are okay,
Yeah.
right? Neither are wrong, but you have to take ownership in that. So
Yeah.
cool.
Well, I
Good
mean,
chat.
there's always room for growth
Yeah.
in all relationships. It's never too late to get started having those conversations, though.
That's so right.
Yeah.
So until next time, guys, make sure if you have questions about this, needs, resources, whatnot, you reach out to us or put it in the comments. We'll see you later.